Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
My name is Clancy Imislund, and I'm an alcoholic. In case any of you in the back didn't see it, I helped her down the stairs, and I sacrificed myself, so I'm trying to create a new image in this area. But I'm glad to be here tonight. I'm glad to be safe and sane and sober, because I didn't used to be, and I may not be again sometime, because that's the nature of this illness. The streets are full of people who used to be safe and sane and sober and fell prey to the misperceptions of the mind that affects people like you and me, that would have us think that somehow something has changed in our lives, or that things are different. Or I know that my first sponsor, when I was sober this time, in my early days of sobriety, used to tell me that, and I knew he was exaggerating, because he meant well, but he was kind of a grinder. And 2 or 3 years later, when he, through a series of situations, died drunk, it punctuated what he said with a certain exclamation point. And I came to understand that. And for many years now, I've been sober, like a young lady who's leading the meeting. Is this your birthday month? You said you came to AA in October. Oh, that's right. You went 4 months and got drunk, didn't you? You dummy. We don't judge. She's got the last word. I better shape up. But this is in about 10 days or so, will be my birthday, 10, 11 days. And this time of year has always been a poignant time for me. It's always the time I've had to do a little work to keep myself in shape. For years and years in my life, I don't know why it was. I'm not certain that it affects anybody else. I just think it does some people. But there's something about autumn. When autumn starts in, there's a kind of when that air gets softer, the little haze in the sunshine, and there's a kind of a sadness that affects me, kind of a poignancy, kind of a mild depression. And for years I went through, when I took my inventory years ago, I looked back, and almost all of the major sadnesses in my life, the suicides, the running away from home, when I say running away from home, I don't mean running away from my parents, I mean running away from my wife and children. Running away from home in desperation was always an autumn thing. And the spring was always an ebullient thing. I don't know if it's the weather, or maybe there's something deeply psychological about autumn indicates the end of summer, you're getting older somehow or something, who knows. But I know that it used to be very sad. And after I was sober for a while, in my early days of my sobriety, and I didn't have any drinking to get me through it, I had terrible times in the early autumn, although I didn't really always realize it. I just was a terrible suicidal, depressive sometimes. And I remember when I was coming up to my first birthday in October, and I called in sick to work, and I think I stayed in bed for 5 days with the covers over my head, just terribly, sickeningly depressed, just without any hope of anything. And then it gets better again. Now over the years it's got so I still have a poignant feeling in autumn, but I know it's going to be there, and I know it's coming. And when it's there, unfortunately, there's one of the few advantages of being a schizophrenic is that you can part of your head says, I'm sick and depressed, and the other head says, oh, for Christ's sake, get off it. We got work to do. Shut up. So I can't even, that's one of the terrible things about sobriety. I can't bear to lie in bed with the covers over my head. And I thought I could do that for the rest of my life at one time. But somehow I'm living in the world, and I like many of the young, the folks who got birthdays tonight, and I want to congratulate them on their first and seventh and eighth birthdays. But several, and the leader as well, discussed about it. They didn't feel they were an alcoholic when they came here. Incidentally, a year ago must have been a bad time. I must have missed that. Both the 1-year birthday and the 7-year birthday lost their families or were divorced or everything went to hell a year ago. And, well, nothing happened to me. That's all I care about. That's how you get when you get to be an old timer. I got mine and screw you, Jack. But I, like most people, I came here not believing I was an alcoholic. And I came and went for a lot of years. And after all those years, I was less convinced I was an alcoholic than I'd been in my first meeting. Because the one thing that always was different in my life is that I knew that my experience somehow was different than these people. I couldn't really define it. At one time I thought I was like them, but little by little it became obvious I wasn't. And I worked on myself a lot. I did a lot of things because I always knew I had deep emotions. So when I was a young man, I wanted to be a success, and I really wanted to be something. I think that's one of the hallmarks. That's almost a sick ambition to people who feel like they're not quite enough somehow. You want to be something so they'll accept you for being something. And so I spent a lot of money and time in psychoanalysis to get to the root of my problems. And a lot of people, say you shouldn't go to psychoanalysis, but I loved it. I loved psychoanalysis. I made breakthroughs that would make tears roll down your cheeks. I saw things and how I'd been hurt and victimized, and I used to come out of there and have a stop for a martini. You think, Christ, it's not surprising I drink, what I've been through, And for example, I was raised in a little town up in northern Wisconsin called Eau Claire, and I was raised in something called the Norwegian Lutheran Church, very, very strict church, very strict church. I always laugh when I hear these Irish people get up the podium and they say, well, I'm Irish and I'm a Catholic, so you know how tough my life has been. Our dropouts used to become Catholics. I'm not attacking them, I'm just reporting the facts. And I was raised in this church. I liked it. It was kind of a strict church, but I didn't know it was strict then. But my grandparents were big in the church. My parents were big in the church. And I was in the church, and I learned to sing little songs in Norwegian, and I was confirmed and catechized. I read the Bible, and I did quite well. The Norwegian Lutheran Church really, as far as I could tell, only has 2 major rules. You don't sin, and you don't monkey with Catholics. And which seems reasonable if you want to go to heaven, I suppose. And through nobody's fault, just a quirk of fate, maybe it was some celestial coin flip, it turned out that unfortunately or unfortunately, I seem to need more fun than other Lutherans. Whose fault is that? Nobody's fault. So I got sinning, then I got monking with Catholics. Then I got sinning with Catholics. So I knew my trip to heaven was going to be indefinitely postponed, but I never blamed the church for it, just one of those things. And years later in psychoanalysis, I discovered that the Norwegian Lutheran Church had psychologically scarred me. It had repressed me at a deep level. How'd you like to find that out about your own church? Put me in a funk. In fact, if I knew then what I know now, I would have formed adult children of Norwegian Lutherans. We could have hired a couple of codependents and sat around and been pissed off every week. I would, a lot of times, I found all sorts of things in therapy about my time in the service and how I was too young and this and that. And if you're thinking, if you're like me, you really want to figure out why you have these feelings. If you've got a lot of money and time, go to therapy. It's great. Because you can find out, I don't know if they're correct reasons, but they seem correct. The only negative part of it is, it doesn't help. You wind up feeling crappy and knowing why. And the only use for it I can think of is maybe late at night in a bar somewhere, some big moose dwarf say, "Hey, what the hell's wrong with you?" Then you can tell him. I wasn't sufficiently nurtured as a child, and I read books. I've always been a reader, which helps you to become an imitation intellectual. And I wear horn-rimmed glasses, and I read a lot, and I can talk on almost any subject. I can fake it anyway. So I read a lot, and I read philosophy. That's what seemed to me intellectuals did. And I read things like Nietzsche. I don't know if you ever heard of Nietzsche, but I loved him because he was such a cynical, nasty, rotten person. And he's the first one I really identified with. And one of the things I liked about Nietzsche, one of his works, one of his characters says, "Why are you concerned about God? God is dead. Look at the chaos about you. Perhaps once he existed to set the orbs of whirl, to set the natural law, if you will. But God is dead. There's no intervention in God in human affairs." I remember reading that and thinking, Jesus, that's good news. Because if that's true, I'm not going to go to hell. I'm just going to die, That's one of the bad things about being a sinner in the Lutheran Church. You always have that secret feeling, enjoy it now, baby, because you're going to burn for 1,000,000 years. So I was glad God was dead, and I really remember reading that thinking how good that is. In fact, there's a very famous plaque at a theological seminary in Chicago I saw years later that sends a shiver down your spine. It says, "God is dead. Signed Friedrich Wilhelm Nietzsche, 1884. And beneath it, it says, "Nietzsche's dead. Signed God, 1906. You never want to read the second lines of anything in a seminary. But I did a lot of things. But the thing that always made me helped me the most in my life was when I was 15 years old, I was already restless and discontent and kind of discombobulated. And early in the Second World War, I told my mother I was going to go to Superior, Wisconsin, and see my aunt, and she gave me bus fare and packed my little bag. And I took that money and hitchhiked to San Francisco. Had no idea where I was going. About this tall, face full of pimples, dumb little puke. And I was going to get in the Marine Corps and kill Japs. I was 15. It looked like it was about 12. And so they said, try the Merchant Marine. They'll take anybody. So after the Coast Guard, and they said, tell them you're 16. So I put out the application, 16. They said, well, you're only 16. You'll have to have this signed by your parents. So I took it around the block, had my parents sign it. And they were really crying for a minute. I got Siemens papers, temporary Siemens papers that day. They sent me to the National Maritime Union. They had me sign a waiver for my union dues. That night I was on a ship going to the South Pacific. Now, I think as the earth went out of sight, I had the first in an endless series of feelings that I had made a severe career error. And these guys were bad guys on this ship, and I was in a room, they called it a forecastle. I didn't know what it was. It's a room to me with three tough-looking men, and they looked at me, Jesus. Because I didn't know why they looked at me in such disdain. I now know, because we were supposed to comprise a watch, the four of us, a deck watch. And I guess each of them looked at me and saw how stupid I was, that they each would have to do 1 1/3 man's work for the rest of that trip, because I wasn't going to do nothing worthwhile. But, they would... They were kind of tough, and on that ship, I kind of got to be their butt of their humor, which would be natural, a dumb kid, Hey, kid, go down to the engine room. Tell them we need a left-handed wrench. Hey, kid, go up on the bridge. Tell the captain we need some elbow grease. And one of the things they did was give me a drink of whiskey. And I'd never had any whiskey because Lutherans don't drink whiskey. And I took a drink of whiskey and it burned my mouth and my throat and my stomach and my stomach and my throat and my mouth and burned his shirt the last I saw. It was just... And I remember their scornful, sneering laughter. That's what I remember that day. But all the way across the central Pacific Ocean, when nobody was looking every day, I'd sneak into this guy's sea bag to take a drink, and I just hated it. Just hated it. But I wanted so desperately to be accepted. I wanted to be accepted. I thought if I'd hold a drink down there, I'd think I was a man. I didn't realize that had nothing to do with it. But as we came into Pearl Harbor, It was, they were still digging up ships from the bombing. And everybody was up in the rail looking, and I was down there taking a drink of that crap again. I remember that because it was the day before my 16th birthday. I took a drink of that crap. I just hated it, and it stayed down. And then I couldn't breathe, And then all of a sudden, I felt better. It made me feel warm and good, and I realized that's why people. I never understood why people drank. I now know why they drank. If you don't puke and you can breathe, it makes you feel better. Not really a big breakthrough, but it's something. Because you learn things in your teens, all sorts of things in your teens. You experience things. On that ship, I learned to smoke. I never smoked. I never knew anybody who smoked, but they smoked. So I smoked. I smoked and puked and smoked and puked and finally smoked, and I smoked 2.5, 3 packs a day every day for the next 45 years. Except when I was on shock treatments and couldn't have matches. But they say smoking doesn't hurt you. Don't listen to them. It has practically made me bald. Finally had to quit while there was a few wisps left there. Look around here, you can see the smokers. In your teens when you learn things, that's when people learn about life. I suppose young guys have the same experience, Most young guys, somewhere along your teens, first you learn about your body changes, and for the first time you learn about lust. And then you learn about love. And then later you learn if you're going to have any luck whatsoever, you've got to disguise lust as love. And you learn all sorts of mannerisms in life. And I didn't think much about drinking. And I sailed some more, and I got to be a little smarter anyway. And then later in the war, I went in the Navy. They had the Naval Hospital up in Northern California being sewed together. And they passed around some tests. I took a test. I've always been good on tests because I'm a reader, and that test turned out to be, they gave me a high school diploma, which I was very glad about later, not then, but I thought about that many times. If I hadn't passed that test or done well, I'd have had to go back to Eau Claire, Wisconsin and start my junior year of high school after the war, and I never would have done that in 1,000 years. I was too slick by then. So I went back and went to college after the war in the first class of veterans, and I was active in college. I won some awards and won a championship, an intercollegiate championship. And I went out in the world. I became a sports writer. I married a Catholic girl because she had black hair. Nobody in our church had black hair. And I became a sports writer, as I said. And she had a terrible tendency that happens to, they never tell Lutheran boys about it, but good Catholic girls have one terrible drawback. They bear children with amazing rapidity. And nobody ever tells you that's going to happen. You become the head of a big family, whether you plan to or not. You suddenly realize, I've become a national distributor of small Catholics. The hounds of fate are on your heels, boy, and you better run. And so I had to get better jobs. I got in advertising and public relations and a lot of things over these years. And all these years I had a lot of emotions. I went to psychoanalysis and I drank. But drinking drinking brought me something more than anybody else. I know it was a chemical, probably illusion. At that time I thought, geez, but I don't care. It made me feel better. And I can look back now and see what drinking does for people like me. I couldn't at the time. It takes a person like me who's never felt like I'm quite enough. Always, there's something missing. I don't know what it is, but other people seem to recognize it if they get close. So you don't let people get close, because if they get close, they won't like you. Stay away and believe my image. And when I have a few drinks, I become, at least temporarily, more than enough. I'm fine. It takes a person like me who's lived with fear all my life, fear of pain, fear of exposure, fear that people are going to find out I'm a phony, fear that people are going to find out I'm not what I'm pretending to be so much. And when I have a few drinks, many times I become fearless. I can talk on any subject. I fight cops. I jump off balconies into swimming pools. Don't have a swimming pool? I'll jump on your lawn. Makes no difference to me. It takes a person like me who's, when I'm feeling wimpy, wussy-like, I'm so sensitive to rejection, I'm almost afraid to ask my wife to dance. When I have a few drinks, it all changes. And the best example I know, but I must have said it many times, but I'll say it one more time. I don't know a better way to say it. I'm sure it's happened to a lot of guys in this room. Be sitting in a bar late at night, thinking about the inequities of life and having a few drinks, and watch a miracle slowly take place in front of your eyes. Watch some old beast gradually become beautiful. I might sidle over to such an old queen at closing time and imply there will be delights beyond her comprehension. Would you like to join me in the old Chevy? Now, if she would say, now, God, if I were sober, I'd hang myself. I'd cut my wrists. I couldn't stand it. When I have a few drinks, I don't feel that way at all. I feel sorry for her. Too bad, bitch. Don't come begging tomorrow. That's why I drink. I drink to feel like to be something. And sometimes I drink too much. Then well-intentioned people think I have a drinking problem. And I thought I might have a drinking problem years ago. I was sent to my first day meeting. I was just a young guy, and I was getting a little bizarre sometimes in my exaltation. So some friends of our family said they'd heard of a thing called AA, and they sent me thought I might want to go to a meeting. And I went to a meeting, my first meeting in 1949. That's a long time ago. A lot of you little snots weren't even born. We love you. I sometimes think of this when I see the young folks today. You have some young folks, this being our big group in West LA, the same thing. We have a lot of young folks. If you're like the young folks in you're like the young folks in our group, I want to tell you something. Some of you may never told you this, but you are the future leaders of AA. And I'll tell you something else.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
If you're like the young folks in our group, I am really glad I'm going to be dead. But I went to AA, and it's made up of people whose problem was drinking. And I thought my problem was drinking until I stayed sober a while and realized, no, it isn't. And I went to therapy, and I went to AA, and I went on jobs. And years later, I looked back on my resume, and I did all these years. It seemed to me I was always in a new town, and I was always getting together a resume. And I got some samples. I was a pretty good writer, so I could get pretty good samples. And I'd go into an advertising agency or a corporation, and I'd get a job, and I'd bring my family in, and pretty soon we'd have a baby, and I'd be working there, and pretty soon the town would start to pall on me, and my emotions would get out of whack, and my drinking would increase, and I'd get tired of these crapheads I was working for, and I was living next to in this two-bit town, and pretty soon the emotional explosion would come, or the drunken explosion, and pretty soon I'd be out of a job, and the next thing I know I'd be in a town with it, getting my resume together and sucking it in. And this went on and on. I thought I was kind of holding my own till I found a place where I fit. And little by little I fell out my own sleeve, apparently, without even being aware of it, because one morning I woke up, and two guys were throwing me out of the Midnight Mission on Skid Row in downtown Los Angeles, saying, "Stay out of here, you damn bum." I tried to explain to them, I'm not a bum. 3 years ago, I was on the faculty of the University of Texas. Ads that I helped write, the old Elsie Nelmer ads for the Borden Company, were running at very week in Life and Time and Saturday Post. I've had my picture in the New York Times for achievement. How many people do you know have had their picture in the New York Times for achievement? But it's very hard to explain these things in midair. And unfortunately, about 3 weeks before that, I had my front teeth kicked out in the Phoenix jail. Because I'd vomited on a man's bunk, and he was upset, and he just kicked my teeth out. And it's very hard. You don't really hit those consonants well when you have no front teeth. But I stood outside of that mission, and I didn't know anybody in Los Angeles. Couldn't even remember how I got to Los Angeles. I just knew that I was alone in the world. My children were gone. My wife was gone. My parents would no longer accept to collect phone call from me. And I hadn't done any great sins or crimes. I'd let people down too many times. They just get tired of it. They go to the well one too many times. And I stood outside. It was kind of a cold, rainy morning. It was October 31st, 1958. And I didn't know what morning was, but I stood up there. There was a little drizzle falling, and sometimes happens. And If a man were to come up to me and said, you know, Slim, very likely you're dying. You weigh 110 pounds. You have nothing going. All you got is the clothes on your back. You have no money. You have no place to turn. There's no person that cares whether you live or die, apparently. Couldn't you conceive you might be an alcoholic? You've been going to AA for 9 years now. Couldn't you conceive you might be an alcoholic? And if my life depended on it, I'd have to say, but I'm not. Not really. You don't understand. It isn't the way it looks. My case is different. Now, why, if he'd have said, why do you think prove that your case is different? I could not have done that. I wouldn't have had the perspective to be able to do that. So I'd have to take the refuge that frightened, desperate people do. They shout. They say things like, leave me alone! Get out of my face! Screw you! Because I didn't know the answer. And looking back now, I know the answer. I've known it for years, and I've worked with a lot of people who had the same feeling. I knew I was an alcoholic, and based on AA, what I knew about AA. For very simple reason, I knew what alcoholics were. I knew what AA is. Alcoholics are people who, when they drink, their emotions get out of whack, their lives get very painful. They wind up going to a place like AA, made up of nice people, and their emotions straighten out, and their lives get comfortable, and they go on with their world. And I know that's true because I've gone to meetings all over the country in my slipping days. And, I remember hearing people talk. I still stick in my mind 2 or 3 things. I remember a guy, where it was, in Dallas or someplace, who said, I haven't seen my 2 little boys in 5 years. They wouldn't let me. But this Friday, we're going to go to the zoo. And I'm so excited. They're going to have a dad, I'll tell you. I remember sitting there thinking, geez, my kids are home. And I envy you that feeling. I just can't connect with them. Another woman I heard in, San Francisco, maybe you talked about, she said, I remember you women will understand this. I don't know if you men will, but for years I felt dirty inside and out in all my showers and baths. Doesn't make any difference. But now in the last couple of years, I've started to feel, so I had a shower inside and out. I don't know how to explain it, but I feel like I can be something. I might even meet a man that I care for, and he might even care for me, and I might even be worthy of him. I remember sitting there with tears in my eyes. I'm not a woman, but I knew exactly what you're talking about, kid. And I heard a guy in Chicago say, they weren't all down and outers. A guy in Chicago say, I've been the vice president of IBM for 4 years, and for 2 of those years, I never felt worthy. I felt ill at ease. I felt they're going to find me out. But somehow I'm starting to feel as though I belong there and they need me as much as I need them. And I remember sitting in these meetings and other meetings, I think, God, I would give anything to feel the way you do, to get it. What is it? Why don't I get this, for Christ's sake? It happens to people smarter than me, and it happens to a lot of people dumber than me. What is it? Why, I wish I were an alcoholic. I wish instead of being some kind of a secret, neurotic misfit. But I knew I was an alcoholic. And so but of course no one came over and talked to me on the street corner, so I didn't have to go through that conversation. But it was raining, so I walked 71 blocks out to the corner of Wilshire and Fairfax, where there's a little AA club called the 6300 Club, little one-story. Now is where Orbach is, that big Orbach store. And I went in there, and I hated to go in there, but I had to get off the street. I was cold and sick, and I'd been in that club a week before, and they'd asked me to leave because they're drunk and fighting, and in my sadness and sickness, lashing out at people. And they didn't even want to let me in, but I went in there, and I just hated it. It's a bunch of people, again, AAs, I've always known, I never really questioned AA worked ever in my life. I know that AA works. It works very well. It just doesn't work for people like me, but it works for everybody. It doesn't convince me when some guy comes up, AA really works, son. God damn it, I know it really works, son. But it doesn't work for some people. It doesn't work for people whose case is different, whose problem really isn't alcohol, whose problem get worse. That's the other reason I knew I wasn't an alcoholic, is because unlike those persons I heard at the meeting and all the people I heard all those years, I drank as much as some of them or more than many of them. And I got in a lot more jams. I've been in jail more often than most alcoholics. I've been in hospitals. But the one difference that I couldn't put my finger on that I could later, unlike them, It's when I get sober is when my life gets screwed up. And that's when the emotional pain starts. And the longer I stay on the wagon, the worse it gets. Till finally the day comes I have no control over it. And I have to drink. I don't drink because I'm a drinker. I drink so I can feel the way you feel when you're sober, for Christ's sake. So I can feel like I'm something. That I'm not just a frightened wussy pretending to be tough and strong. And sometimes I drink too much. And then well-meaning people say, oh, you ought to go to AA. You've got a drinking problem. And you have to say, gee, thanks for the advice. But inside of you, a visceral voice just wants to shriek, but you don't understand. Doesn't anybody understand? I stood at that AA club in the corner of Wilshire and Fairfax, and they told me how AA works. Yes, I know it works. Thank you very much. Really glad to hear all that. And I had no place to sleep that night, so somebody said, there's an old abandoned car out in the tall grass out there. Why don't you go sleep in the old abandoned car? So I went and slept in the old abandoned car that night. And I hung around that stinking club, and I hated it. And I hated these people because they were all doing so well, and I was nothing. And I look back now, and it just sends a shiver down my spine. I had no idea then or thereafter that would be my sobriety date. I didn't even want it to be my sobriety date. I wasn't even trying to quit. I just was trying to stay off the street. I suppose every long-term slipper, such as me, who ever stayed sober again, looks back and wonders, what was the difference this time? What made the difference this time? Not so much for my own information, but I'd like to know that so I could convey it to people that are sent to me who are long-term slippers, as though I have some magic answer. They've been sending people to me for 35 years, long-term slippers, and I wish I had some magic sentence I could tell them that would put things right, but there's no way to convey sobriety. It's very similar to something much less complex, but much the same theory. I remember a year or two ago helping one of my grandsons to learn to ride a bicycle. And he fell down, and his nose bled, and he scratched his arm. And I would give anything if I could get out on that bike and take those falls for him, because I don't cry. I can handle it. I love the kid. I'd like to do it. But I can't, obviously. You know that. All you can do is put him back on the bike and tell him to steer and move his legs, and somehow he'll get better. And I don't want to do it, Grandpa. Yes, you do. You got to give it a try. And you keep doing that, and I'm sure it's happened to most of the people in this room, maybe all of us. Somewhere along the line, nobody knows how or why, you can't explain it. One moment, you suddenly get a sense of balance, and you can ride a bicycle for the rest of your life. Or you can ride a motorcycle. You can do anything with two wheels. But you cannot convey that ability to anyone you know that you love with your life. You give your life for, but you can't give them the power to ride a bicycle. And you certainly can't convey to people the power to stay sober. And so it's a continual program of conversion here. Because I am sure that most people who come here, sooner or later, some at one level or another in their lives, feel they are not alcoholics as AA describes alcoholics, that their case is different. I don't suppose there's a universal cry. I was thinking tonight, I see my friend Lori back there, who I didn't really know her, but I was speaking down in Australia about a year and a half ago for the founding of AA, celebrating the founding of AA. And on the plane on the way back, the airline attendant says, "Aren't you Clancy?" And I said, "Not necessarily." She said, "I heard you talk." I said, "Oh, yeah." And there was a newcomer also on that plane, 2 months sober, who was a stewardess. And all the way home, they just took care of me with coffee and goodies, and the other people around me just sort of gazed. A lady behind me said, I heard her tell her husband, Lori heard it too, said, "I think he's some movie star." Hasn't happened since, I'm sorry to say. What plane you on again, Lori? But over the past 4 or 5 or 6 years, I'm thinking I have an opportunity, because I've been sober a long time and active a long time, to go a lot of places. I've been talked in Australia, New Zealand, and Tahiti, and Berlin and Amsterdam and Cape Town and Johannesburg in South Africa, and a lot of places. And you would think that AA would be exotic in these places, all kinds of unusual, wonderful things. And it really isn't, except for the accents. It's the same thing you hear in in your group right here tonight. Some people who have come to believe it, some people who don't believe it, and new people who don't know which way to go, and these two forces fight for their souls. It really boils down to that. It's almost like fighting for their souls, because there are people who say, come and do these inconvenient things. And someone else says, you don't have to do that crap. Come on, I don't do that crap, and I'm sober. And it's a continual battle for their souls. And sometimes a lot of people die and never find out they never have tried AA, because they've sat in the meetings, and as the old joke goes, they've sat in the hen house wondering why they can't lay eggs. Sitting in the hen house doesn't make you a chicken, unfortunately, as has been said here tonight. And there's a great difference between involvement and commitment. I haven't thought of this for a long time. This may be the corniest thing you've ever heard, and you can be glad you're here to hear it tonight. That's the difference in a plate of ham and eggs. The chicken is involved, the pig is committed. And that's what I might as well just tap dance off now and jump in my car and drive home. I've told you all I know. But somehow, I think, did I really want to stay sober this time? Not really, because the one time I really wanted to stay sober, I wanted to stay sober in Texas, and I'd done it because one night I had been out, gotten drunk and gotten in a fight. No big deal. I was in jail again overnight. I was in jail a lot overnight because I was very flamboyant. But that night, my son died, and they couldn't find me. And I just felt so bad. I took a vow in his little casket, this won't happen again. And so I went to Texas, and I got this job, and my family came in, and my wife reminded me that my drinking was getting a little bad, so I stopped drinking for my son, John. And I didn't drink, and I went and saw a couple of psychiatrists, and I went to some AA meetings, the same old stuff again, the meaningless stuff seemed to me. And it got worse and worse, and I got the people started to be a drag. My children, whom I loved, but I couldn't bear to be in the room with them because they were so noisy, and stop monkeying with the dog. Just. And I hated the wind blowing. And one day I couldn't stand it, and I needed to drink so bad I could scream. But you can't drink when you've taken a vow in your son's casket. So my family was in church. I just pulled the car in the garage and hooked up with a hose in the exhaust pipe and got out of the car and went to sleep and died. And a neighbor watched this, and he came over and pulled me out dead, briefly dead. They beat at my chest, rushed me to the hospital. After some examination, thought I was mentally ill and moved me to a locked ward and examined me some more and committed me for an indefinite period to the Texas State Insane Asylum at Big Spring, Texas. And I'll tell you, there's nothing on my commitment paper that said alcoholic. It said schizophrenic with paranoid tendencies. And that's how I get when I stay sober. I don't want to stay sober. It makes me crazy. And I look back and think, how did I stay sober? And I guess what happened, and I'll tell people here that might be having a difficulty, I don't know if I could make this really clear, but I was so desperate, and I've been desperate a lot of times, but I seem to be another inch of desperation in the pain. I was desperate enough to begin to take actions in AA that I thought were silly and inane, stupid things that were beneath me or anybody else with any brains. I began taking actions that I didn't really want to take it, but they did the same thing then as they do now. They say, get a sponsor, get a sponsor. So I'd seen this guy in the movies, and he always played loving roles, and asked to be my sponsor. And it turned out he should have won the Academy Award for every loving role he ever played, because he was a cruel, nasty dictator. Several times in my first year, if I had the money, I'd have called the World Service office and turned him in. I just want you to know, there's an old timer in Los Angeles killing newcomers. I couldn't get the dough together, but I needed to. Now it's all different. Now when I talk to the World Service Office in New York, I say, no, I'm not. I've been on both sides of this equation. I'd rather be the one sleeping while somebody else lies awake and thinks about killing me. But But he got me to take actions, and little by little I began to do things that I thought were inane and stupid. My life didn't get a hell of a lot better, but I stayed sober somehow, and I almost drank a few times and got some terrible depressions, because I was a depressive, it seemed to me. And I finally got to a point, after I came out of a depression, I was about 5 months sober. I thought, I can't go through, I'm already drinking one of these, Jesus. So I did something that sounds inane now, but you might understand it. I said to myself, I will not drink. I will not drink. I will give myself permission to commit suicide if it gets bad enough. But I will not drink, because I will not take that failure again. And it's a funny thing, after that, there were several times that were bad enough to drink, but not quite bad enough to commit suicide. And one of the reasons I didn't want to drink is another silly, dumb reason, but I'm sure there are some people here who identify this. There were most of the people around that club, and most of the people I knew in AA, I was just a skinny guy without front teeth, wearing cast-off clothes, but with a smart mouth. God, there's nothing in the world worse than a loser with a smart mouth. Yeah, that's a bunch of crap. You ever read anything about, I used to be something. But there were a few guys who were kind to me and would give me pats on the back. Very few people I can remember who liked me, but there's some of them, a guy named Jim Kemper who went back later. He was a remittance man from the Kemper family in Chicago, and he was such a nice man that he finally, when he stayed sober 5 years, they brought him back to Chicago, and he became head of the whole Kemper insurance but when he was a new guy, he was a nice man. Pat me on the back. And I used to think to myself, if I get drunk, all of these sons of bitches that are ridiculing me will be happy. And those few nice guys who like me will feel sad. I refuse to give those pukes the pleasure. I'll stay sober just to spite those nasty bastards, and I'll make these guys feel good. And I got through a couple of terrible depressions that way. But little by little, I began to take the actions. And little by little, over a period of time, when I was 6 months sober, I'd worked up to being a dishwasher at the Gaiety Delicatessen on Sunset. And I got fired for not being up to their standards emotionally. And that day I was going to commit suicide. And I called up my sponsor. My sponsor cursed me into doing something I thought I'd never do. He says, you've got to take your damn inventory. And I'd already told him, I've taken my inventory with a psychiatrist. Why do I want to take it with an out-of-work actor, for Christ's sake? Which, I don't know why he ever yelled at me. But that, he cursed me, and that, I said, in my judgment, that's the last thing in the world I need. He says, in your judgment, you live in the back seat of an abandoned car, for Christ's sake. If I wanted your judgment, I'd put my head in the back seat and ask you for it, So I took an inventory. It did make me feel, didn't change my life, but I stayed sober. I guess it did change my life, but in a way I couldn't see, and I took a fifth step and made amends to people little by little. By the time I was a year sober, I was able to hold a job wrapping packages in the back of an advertising agency. Same kind of job I had when I was 14, really making my move now, I'll tell you. But I kept going to work, and I finally got a little job as a writer when I was 2 years sober, and I went to work every day because my sponsor was so adamant about that. And by the time when I was 5 years sober, I was head of advertising for that medical corporation. I had front teeth by then. In case you're new and you're missing teeth, let me give you some hope. Once you become spiritually perfect, they grow back. And have your sponsor explain that to you at Vespers. But when I was 7 years sober, another guy and I were brought into Hollywood, and we created something called Boss Radio. It became the #1 hard rock station in the world. We all wore shiny suits and said, what's coming on down, baby? When I was 10 years sober, I was downtown doing public relations for the oil companies. 15 years sober, I was a marketing director in Beverly Hills. And that same old terrible career error, vicious thing reared its head again. And one day I found myself leaving a job in Beverly Hills, and for the last 21 and a half years, I run the Midnight Mission on Skid Row, the place that threw me out in 1958. People say, why would you give up this wonderful career to go back and run that lousy mission? And I've developed several good answers, such as, well, I told that guy I'd come back and get him someday, and I just haven't found him yet. Or, it was such a significant decrease in salary, I thought it must be spiritual. But it wasn't. And it's a kind of a silly thing. But when I was 5 years sober, the same wife and all those children had the crinkle of green in my wallet all the way to a post office box in Dallas. They leaped out of their post office box, fled to my side. 9 months and 10 seconds later, another Catholic hit the street. Then I got a metronome, and that took care of that. But they're all grown up and all doing pretty good. And they're all fine, and I've been sober for in a couple weeks, 10 days, it'll be 37 years since I walked off Skid Row that morning. And it's an odd thing. Some great things have happened. I got together with my parents, my father, and I got together so well, he came out here and stayed with me before he died. And at one time, I hadn't talked to him in 10 years. And my kids worked out all right. Everything was fine. I got some good jobs. But I'll tell you, the magic thing is this. Well, one of the great things that happened to me is that after I was sober a while, I took these actions for a while, I suddenly began to realize what these old fools like Chuck Chamberlain and Paul Guilfoyle and other guys were telling me. That God was not trying to destroy me. God was trying to love me, and there it would be safe to pray to God because he wasn't trying to destroy me. And I fought God as much as anybody in this room. And I'll tell you something, for 35 years I haven't said a day has not gone by that I haven't prayed to God and thanked him for my sobriety and asked him to help me to know his will for me and the courage to get strength to carry it out. That's all I ever asked for, because I'm such a dicker. If I ask for a job or a woman or a house or a car, I'll sell out. Just ask God. Like the greatest step, one of the great steps in there, praying only for knowledge of God's will for me and the power to carry it out. And what I want to tell you is this, if you're new tonight, that what AA does for you. Now, I've been sober 37 years. If you're new, you might think, God, this guy's been dry 37 years. He's about to burst into flame up there. Maybe we ought to get out of here. Why would I still be active at AA? Why would I still be working with the newcomer this afternoon for an hour in my office? Why would I have 150 AAs in my backyard tomorrow morning, playing games and doing things? And why would I be sitting in a meeting? Why would I be doing that? I don't need it. I'm doing fine. I'll tell you why. What AA does, I really believe this. If it didn't, I wouldn't be here. AA is designed to very slowly do what alcohol did fast. It takes a person like me who never felt like they were quite enough, and most of the time today I feel like I'm enough. Not all the time. That used to bother me. I think, God, I'm sponsoring people, I'm doing things. Why did I always feel like I'm enough? And it suddenly struck me. No human being feels like they're enough all the time. Not the president, not the senator, not the pope, not anybody. No human being does it. It's just part of being a human being. But you can feel like you're enough most of the time. It takes a person like me who's lived with fear all my life. And I find myself sometimes now doing things that strike people as fearless. A couple times in the last 3 years, I've found myself going down alleys on Skid Row where the police declined to go down with drawn guns. And I'm down there with my mouth to pull some son of a bitch out. And people say, oh, Clancy, you're so fearless. I don't think it's fearless. I know what to do. I know how to do that. Because I have to also remember, if I were sitting home at night with my wife in the living room and I heard a suspicious noise in the backyard, I'd send her to see what it was. It might be a boogeyman, and everybody knows that boogeymen are more afraid of Al-Anons than AAs, that's all. It takes a person like me who's always felt so sensitive and lived with hurt feelings about 80% of the time. And today, I still have my feelings hurt once in a while. I sometimes feel rejected. But I no longer think it's a celestial conspiracy. I just realize they and I are seeing this from different perspectives. And if I can see where they're coming from, I can resolve it. And that's why I stay in AA. I stay in AA because it brings to me what I looked for in alcohol, better than anything. And I'll tell you this, you three new people. I'll guarantee you, I am not a hero and I'm not a wonderful person. If there were a better place to be, I would be there. I would be there because I'm looking for the ultimate in comfort that I can get. And if there were a better place to be, I would be there. But here I've discovered that people like you and me, unlike any place in the world, on a continuing basis, can live in some sort of dignity that makes your life meaningful. And when that happens, it's all worthwhile. Thank you.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down. And then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.